Hello, today's topic for Neurodivergent Wednesday is the topic around, are you feeling all upside down, as a lot of people are, and a lot of children, neurodivergent children in particular, are feeling really confused. And so, as I say, most people are feeling really confused, and it tends to come in waves. And so one minute they'll feel okay, and the next minute they won't feel so good. So I thought I'd just address that one today and see what we could do about it and see what skills we could offer you to assist. And you may be able to hear the beautiful cacophony of birds outside my window here. So I'll deliberately leave the window open because it really is a lovely sound. So what's happening to you and your neurodivergent students and children? There is loads going on. There is, and I'm sure you know most of these. There is anxiety, there's panic, there's children feeling as if they're climbing up the walls. I've been talking to a number of parents, and some of them are reporting things like they like the calmer world or they don't like the calmer world, and they're really confused because all their patterns have changed and everything they were used to doing they can't do anymore, or some of the things anyway. And so 3 weeks in, I think this is the beginning of the 4th week, we've got a lot of kids who are all behaving differently. Some of them are very sensitive, and there is a lot of fear going around. So if they're fearful, they may well be picking up everybody else's fearfulness. Some of them might be loving it, some of them might be hating it. And some of them might just be zoned out and really not here, or in the sensory overload, where their behavior tends to go completely haywire because they just are feeling so. Of course, there are some kids and parents who are finding this pause better. They're finding that it's calmer, life is going a lot slower, they've got time to do things they didn't normally do, which includes paying attention to their kids. And so there is some advantages to it. And the more I get into it on week 4, the more I realize there are some real amazing advantages. And it is a time for either people to be really busy who are in the critical services, or time for people to take a bit of reflection on what they really want to do in life. That's one thing that's coming up a lot. So that's what I'm just setting the scene, if you like. Now, the next slide is a slide that is out of my book, The Elephants in the Classroom. It's the key to what I do, really. And these are the things that happen that challenge neurodivergent students. And so there's 5 of them, sorry. There's 5 of them. One is safety, is the big one on the left here. And safety can drop down into poor behavior, anxiety, fear, trauma, and having poor breathing. And you've probably heard me talk about breathing, but I'm going to again in a bit. And so not having good breathing. There's the one at the top here, which is my favorite one, which is their strengths. And nearly all of these students have got amazing strengths in one thing or another. The question is how you can explore them and how you can find out what their amazing strengths are. Because normally, day-to-day life is so busy with these kids that you probably don't even notice some of these amazing things they can do. Some of them might be on the sports field, some of them might be memory, some of them might be artistic. So they can be things that they will do in school or things that they might do outside school. I was talking to some horses in the field this morning, and there was a girl riding her horse around with amazing control over the horse. I was really impressed. I've never been into riding. The next one down here is being grounded. Absolutely essential for keeping your gifts under control. And the next one is controlling your mental images. So you need to be able to picture things to improve your memory, but you also need to be able to keep them still and in some sort of order so they don't run your life. And the last one here is, once you've got all the 4 above fixed, then what are you going to use these mental images for, apart from what you started off, like art, for example? You might be using them for literacy, numeracy, art, whatever you want to do in life, then you can use visual skills. And these are the themes that I see for every child that we meet, wherever they are on the neurodivergent scale, whether they're in literacy challenges or ADHD or autistic spectrum challenges. These I call them three skills, and one is safety, one is being grounded, and one is controlling your mental images. The fourth one is the real gifts and the real strengths, and those are always unique to the person. And for different challenges, different diagnoses, if you like, there will be different balances between these things. For example, the dyslexic crew nearly always have got good mental imagery, and if they can't keep letters still on the page, then they're not grounded, I can tell you. And the other thing is, if they've never learnt to visualize words, they're going to be poor at literacy. So that's at one end of the scale. The other end of the scale, we have the autistic spectrum, which are feeling incredibly unsafe and very anxious. And they've got some gifts buried deep in their deep in themselves that it's difficult to prize out of them, but it's nearly always visual. And there's a lot of progress nowadays to teaching children visually, but what you've also got to do is get their internal pictures under control. They nearly always are very ungrounded, and therefore they can't control their mental images, and then they will be able to use their visual skills for all sorts of things. So the balance, if you like, between these five things is always different. And so I want to talk to you about three of them. Mental imagery. Now, mental imagery can be a huge strength. And if you've got somebody who has got a photographic memory, can just look at a page and just remember it, can remember what they did last Christmas, they can read a book and remember it perfectly. That's what I would call a strength. The only problem with all strengths is they can be a weakness. And so on the right-hand side here is we've got what mental imagery looks like when it's a weakness. There is so much going on in your head, in and above your head. It's really, really confusing. And it can be quite painful. You know, when you feel like doing that, that's what they're doing, and it's most of the time. So there's a plus side and there's a downside. And I was doing some work recently on skills, and there was this lovely online facility called VIA, V-I-A, which is .co.uk, where you can just take an online test to see what your strengths are. Now, if you look at those strengths, you can see a positive and a negative of each one. For example, honesty. Honesty, you'd think, was a really good strength for people to be honest. But when it turns into a weakness, you probably know what it's like as a weakness. People say exactly what they think, don't care if they upset people, but they're being honest. So all of these strengths that they talk about, and you can go online and do your own test if you want to, all of the strengths they talk about, that you can also see the flip side of it. Keeping control of your mental images is absolutely essential. You can see the little lad here on the right is having a bit of a bad time with his mental imagery. And so what we can do with him is to help him to get grounded, which I'm going to come to in a minute. And another way of doing it is if too much is going on, you know, the remote control on the television. This is a really simple skill. It's a really good metaphor. You know the remote control on the television where you can change channels, or you can turn it off, or you can turn it on. Get them to see if they can use a remote control on their mental imagery, turn them on and turn them off, and see what happens. And so that's a really useful skill. And it stops them going into sensory overload if they can just do it with the remote control. And lots of kids can. Grounding is the other one. What evidence have we got for this? Thousands and thousands of children we've talked to about their mental imagery, and this is exactly what we've learned, is that nearly everybody on the neurodivergent spectrum has got great mental imagery, but it can turn into a chaotic weakness. And there's, for example, with a highly autistic child who would rather sit in the corner and play with his toys right close up so he doesn't have to look at anything else. It's because he's trying to drown that chaos that's going on in the right-hand side there. So let's take another one, good breathing. This is something I talk about incessantly because last year I was investigating breathing, and it was because I'd had an operation and I wanted to improve my lung capacity. But what I stumbled over was the fact that about 70%, and this is a US figure, but I've no reason to believe it's not similar in the UK, about 70% of children diagnosed with ADHD are mouth breathers. Now, mouth breathing is not a healthy thing to do on a permanent basis. What you want to be doing is breathing in through your nose, right down to the center of your belly, and breathing, going back the same way, and breathing out through your nose. Why do you want to do that? Well, the first thing is if you breathe in through your nose, you're cleaning the air, you're hydrating the air in the back of your nasal cavity, you're warming or cooling the air depending on the temperature, so it's the right temperature for getting into your lungs. In addition, you add in the back of your nasal cavity here, you add nitric oxide, which is a good spring clean for anything that's coming in through your nose. So basically, you get air in the right prescription for it to come into your lungs. Breathing out through your nose is different. Breathing, if you've ever blown up a lot of balloons, you will know exactly what I mean by this. If you're blowing out a lot of carbon dioxide through your mouth, then you can tend to go a bit lightheaded and a bit woozy, and you might even be a bit wobbly on your feet. That's because you're getting lack of oxygenation in your brain because you're expelling too much carbon dioxide. It's really important that you keep carbon dioxide in your blood vessels, so that it's the key to getting oxygen to pass from your blood vessels into your cells, your muscles, your tendons, your internal organs, and your brain. And so it's really important to not breathe out on a permanent basis through your mouth. You can on a temporary basis, and some of the yoga exercises do, but they're not recommending you do that 24/7. And the worst thing about ADHD is that, and people going hyper, is if you've got lack of oxygenation in your brain, you will tend to go hyper. And so if you want to calm somebody down who's hyper, get them to shut their mouths and breathe in gently through their nose and breathe out gently. And of course, what I'd recommend is you do this when they're calm, so they learn the skill rather than trying to do it when they are upset. And if I think of somebody crying, for example, they invariably have got their mouth open and they're almost gasping for air. Another thing you can do is to help people get more grounded, which I'll come on to in a minute. One really easy way to find out how people are breathing is to get them to lie on the floor. This is really fun for kids. Get 3 small books, put one on the top of their chest, one on their belly, and one on the top of their trousers. And then just get them to lie there and ask them to breathe normally, whatever they would normally do. And you'll see which of the books move. If the top book moves, means you're breathing into the top of your chest, which is more stressful. If the middle one moves, that's great, that's belly breathing. And if the bottom one moves, that's even better, because that means your diaphragm is going up and down, which is the thing which encourages your lungs to move in and out. And then what you can do is, okay, if you've found out they're breathing on the top of your chest, the top of their chest, you can then say, okay, try and get the middle book to move. And so they won't move the top so much, they'll be moving in the middle. And of course their shoulders will tend to be going up and down like this when they're breathing in the top of their chest. So there's a lot of research about nasal diaphragmatic breathing, and there is a lot which relates to ADHD as well. So let me just give you a brief introduction to grounding. This is what I see these kids doing at the moment, really. They're not really on the planet. They're upside down. They're got too much going on in their heads, and good breathing will help them to get grounded, and grounding will calm their mental imagery. So it's like the three things go together. Being out of your body is the reptilian response to panic, which you've no doubt heard about, which is fight and flight. And so you're in a situation that you feel is very scary, which it might not be, but you feel it's very scary, so it is. And at this point, when you're ungrounded, you've got no logical thought going on through the front of your brain. It's all your reptilian response of, I either want to run away or I want to fight, which is very common to a lot of kids at the moment who are feeling very ungrounded. They just want to fight, and they've got no logical thought going on, and they may well be in sensory overload as well. Simple skill with them is, let me just find mine, egg timer. Right, here is my egg timer, little egg timer here. And what I suggest you do is you give an egg timer to the child and say, when you're feeling overwhelmed, turn over your egg timer and we won't talk to you anymore. So they get 2 minutes to be completely calm and get grounded again. And so their whole job is to watch the sand come down in the egg timer, which you may not be able to see on this screen. And their job is to get themselves grounded. Getting themselves grounded is a trick which takes a little practice and will really change what's going on for them. The way we do it with small children is, and while I leave that running down there, I'll show you with Teddy, is, hello Teddy. And so what I do is I give them a little push, but I put my hand behind them so I don't push them over. I just want to see how wobbly they are on their feet. And then I say to them, okay, stand up and just feel your feet on the ground. You can do this with no shoes on as well. That's really handy. Just concentrate on your feet and feel as if you've got a tree growing out of your feet. So initially, you may have roots about that long, and then they go right down into the floor, then they go right down into ground, then they go right down to the center of the world, and then they spread right out, so you're feeling really firmly connected to the ground. So that's another thing. That's all they need to be doing. While the egg timer's going, they need to, don't speak to them because that's pulling them back into sensory overload again. You just leave them to get calm. There's a couple of other ways of doing it. One is to use bubbles, these sort of things, very cheap, pound a thing in Poundland or something. And if you blow bubbles, I don't like bubble blowing so much. We used to use it, but since we've moved on to nose breathing, it's not very easy to blow the bubbles through your nose. But if you're blowing bubbles, what you need to do is take a quick breath in and a very slow breath out. And of course, that's exactly what you need in order to get a lot of bubbles. You take a quick breath in and then go to blow the best bubbles. And a really funny one is that the best place in the house to get grounded, and you can guess at this, but it's actually the toilet. If you sit on the toilet, it's actually easier to get grounded, and you can feel your body slowly sink. The reason for this is the plumbing in the toilet is connected down into the ground. So you've got a really good start before you try doing anything in your body. So do try that one. It's one of my favorite ones. And evidence. Everybody wants evidence these days. There's lots of things that people do and sell you products to do this. And for example, you can have weighted jackets, which there's a lot of research behind that weighted jackets help people get grounded, and it helps people reduce their autistic spectrum symptoms. There's even now weighted jackets for dogs. And as I have a very ungrounded dog, I'm thinking of investing in a weighted jacket for him. But what we're doing is trying to help them get into their bodies. We have three things which are the most important, if you like. The is grounding, is breathing, and is control of your mental imagery. And those three things will make a huge difference. And you're more than welcome to come back to me and talk to me about what skills we've got to help you. If you go on my blog, which is olivehickmott.co.uk, or you can get to it through Empowering Learning, you'll find there's a story there about, there's 3 stories on the blog recently this week. One of them was a gifted and talented lad who was just amazing at how quickly he got the message. And there was 2 kids in special needs. They were both 11 plus, and both were absolutely incapable of spelling or reading anything. One lad was autistic and spent his time tearing up bits of plastic until I showed him how to spell visually, and he was amazing. And another lad who didn't have any words, letters. He was 11 years old. He didn't know the shape of a single letter. And we taught him visually how to shape letters. And again, amazing story. So it's worth going and listening to those. There's a video and a written up story. And the gifted and talented lad wrote up his own story at the end of the day. And I published it in my latest book, The Elephants in the Classroom. But you can read it there. So thank you all for joining me today. And this Wednesday call happens every Wednesday. I call it Neurodivergent Wednesday. First thing in the morning, it tends to be the literacy, numeracy type things. And the 2 o'clock one is for the ADHD and autism ones. And so do join me next week. You'll find details on empoweringlearning.co.uk. Thank you very much for joining me.